the American period colonization of southwest Illinois can be traced to the 1798 establishment of the Turkey Hill settlement and the 1802 founding of the Ridge Prairie settlement near modern Belleville in St. Clair County. Most of these early period settlers were transplants from the slightly earlier settlements of the Trans-Appalachian upland south. One of the earliest of these was David Everett, the son-in-law of a prominent Methodist circuit rider who settled here in about 1811. The Everett family occupied their farm until 1833, when it was purchased by Joseph Ledergerber, a recent immigrant from Switzerland and one of the early representatives of the major German-speaking migration into southern Illinois that occurred between 1830 and 1860. Over the next 3 decades, the Ledergerber farm became one of the largest and most successful operations in the county. In 1861, the recently widowed Ledergerber sold the property and returned to Switzerland to live out the remaining years of his life. A series of other owners occupied the property until its final abandonment in 1995. In 2010, it was determined that both the site and the underlying property would be impacted by proposed improvements to the St. Louis Mid-America Airport. As part of our working relationship with IDOT, ISAS was authorized to conduct data recovery excavations in advance of those actions, which resulted in the excavation of 45 features ranging in date from circa 1810 through the late 20th century, with particularly strong recoveries from the pre-Civil War period. Identifiable features include privies, cisterns, wells, cellars, a smokehouse, and miscellaneous pit features. In order to interpret the materials recovered from the site, it was critical to determine which deposits were associated with which occupants. On its face, the pre-1833 Everett and the post-1833 Ledergerber occupations should include a suite of distinctive temporal markers that would allow their sorting, particularly with respect to the refined table ceramics. While this was certainly true, the fact that the Ledergerbers apparently continued to use the same refuse features as the Everetts confounded the issue. As the purchasing of basic household staples was nearly identical between the two households, it was discretionary spending that provided the basic sort. In this instance, it was apparent that, of all the features that could be attributed to either Everett or Ledergerber, only a smaller subset included materials related to alcohol consumption. And given the known social disparities between the two early occupants, the presumably teetotaling Methodist Everett and the perhaps more urbane European immigrant Ledergerber, it was assumed that the extensive glass assemblage was related to the Ledergerber occupation, a conclusion that was borne out by further research. While the recovery of glass bottles and drinking vessels is typical of residential sites of this period, the quantities are typically very small, usually no more than 1 or 2 bottles and no more than a few glass tumblers. Even on tavern sites of the period, glass recoveries are minimal, with the old Landmark Tavern in Marion County yielding only 6 flasks, 6 wine bottles, and 11 tumblers from the entire site. The Ledergerber glass assemblage, on the other hand, was extensive, including 33 primarily French wine bottles and English spirit bottles, and an additional 10 bottles that can be generally related to alcohol consumption. Glass tablewares included 3 stemwares and 33 tumblers. Obviously, the disparities between refuse related to household level consumption and a commercial operation, such as a tavern, could have resulted from many different factors. For example, alcohol consumption at the tavern may have been largely supplied by barrel or jugged spirits, such as whiskey, and drinking vessels may have been dominated by metal cups rather than inherently fragile glasswares. Conversely, alcohol consumption at the household level may also have included barreled or jugged spirits, but with the addition of higher value imported products, such as French and German wines, Dutch and English gin, served in more genteel fashion in glass stemware and tumblers, as the rule rather than the exception. In any case, the Ledergerber glass assemblage appears to signify a family that was not only not averse to alcohol consumption, but in fact appears to have placed great store on the acquisition of imported wines and liquors. Perhaps more significantly, it points out that even at this early date, when much of Illinois was just beginning to be settled, the older southern portions of the state, with their ready access to St. Louis and New Orleans markets, were already very much integrated into the larger world market systems.